Now the next question I got was how to set trim lock and pirouette compensation. So we come down here to trim lock. Trim lock is effectively heading hold. It's heading hold on your cyclics. The reason you would need to activate trim lock and not just leave trim lock on all the time is because if you're on the ground at too low of a head speed and trim lock is on, the model, as you're sitting there, the head speed's low, and if the model just moves a little bit, the flight control is going to try to correct for that. If your head speed isn't high enough, it'll actually be out of phase and the model can actually tip over. So you want to make sure not to actually be in trim lock until you're up to full head speed. What I use to activate or to tell the Total G when to go to trim lock, I use throttle, the throttle setting. When the throttle is above about 30%, then the trim lock turns on. Then it's going to try to attempt to hold heading no matter what you do. So you have to make sure that you're up to RPM on the head. Make sure your rotor speed is high enough once your throttle's at 30% throttle. That way it'll lift off in trim lock and everything will be steady. The one danger is if you're running an electric and you tend to run an ESC that has a slow spool up. I know some people like to just immediately go to 80% throttle or 70% throttle and let the ESC slowly spool it up. The problem is if you're using throttle as your activation for trim lock, as soon as you go to 80% throttle, trim lock's going to go, oh, you're above 30%, so you must have enough head speed, so I'm going to go ahead and go into trim lock. But you won't have enough head speed because it's slowly spooling up. So it'll confuse the Total G and it'll try to tip over. So you have to make sure to go ahead and get your head speed up. What I do if I use an ESC on the Castle, the Governor, excuse me, I set my 0 to 50% throttle setting to go ahead and give me a head speed of about 18 or 1900. And then I just set my throttle at 25% in normal. And as I go into normal or stunt 1, it goes ahead and spools my head speed up to enough head speed that it's ready to take off. And then when I actually go to the mode to take off, the RPM's already up. And then it'll activate the trim lock and I'm okay to fly. Okay, the next question I got, pirouette compensation. The only settings now with the newest program on pirouette compensation is either auto or off. Off means there's no pirouette compensation at all. That means it's going to fly fairly a natural pirouette. It's not a flat pirouette. It's one you're going to have to fly more. Auto is more of a flattening pirouette. So the model should try to stay flat in the pirouettes. There's nothing to set here other than to turn it on. What you need to do in the model if you're going to run auto pirouette is you need to level the swash plate at 0 degrees with your channel input pulse width at 1500. If you go in and set your channel input pulse width to 1500, you then on the collective, you then need to come in and make sure that your collectives are at 0, which I have not done on this model. They're not presently set at 0. You want to square it up here. Make sure this is square when this is centered, and when you're at 0 degrees, make sure all that's level. You then want to go in and in the mode in which it's going to fly, meaning canopy on everything, you want to CG the model. So when you lift it up, you want it to actually end up being balanced on the main shaft. Then when you fly it, what you're going to actually do is you're going to turn off the flight control. In my case, I've got flight control on this switch. I just turn off the flight control, and then I'm going to hover it in calm air with the flight control off, and then I'm going to see what the model does. If the model tips forward or the model goes right or left, I'm going to adjust the swash plate push rods so that the model sits in dead calm air. And the critical thing is dead calm air. If there's any wind, it's going to tend to try to go toward it and to the right. So you need to take that into account. If there's a wind, that will tend to detrim the model. Once you've trimmed it in dead calm air to where it sits stationary in calm air, then that's really it. Then it's ready to fly. The auto pirouette is on. It should now pirouette flat. Okay, how to mechanically trim the model? Oh, we just went over that. You can do it in calm air. One other point about the trimming it, if it is windy, if there is a light breeze, you can't do it in really heavy breeze no matter what, but a light breeze, again, as the wind blows, it blows towards you, like nose into the, you're hovering tail end, the wind's coming towards you. As the wind blows, I believe it tends to go forward and to the right. I think that's correct. That's going to be true, or away from you and to your right, excuse me. That's going to be true no matter where the nose of the model's sitting. So if it's sitting sideways, it's going to go this way and forward. If it's nose into you, it's going to go back and to the left. If it's this way, it's going to go right and to the back. So If you trim it so that it always goes that same way relative to you, you now know the model is trimmed. So even in a light breeze, you can trim it. You just have to keep in mind the model is always going to want to go one way. So if you try hovering it each direction, if one of the directions it goes the opposite of the others, you need to trim that direction so it goes the same direction as the others. And that lets you know that it actually is trimmed even in a light breeze. But the best thing is to do it in calm air. Calm air, it should just sit there. Okay. The other question I got, he said he's been watching online, and some people think that the orientation that you're running it in, horizontal front back or horizontal side, is affecting the flying. That's a question that he had found. I honestly have not seen that. I've tried both horizontal back front and side on the mounting of the Total G. I've not seen that had any effect on the performance. The next question was actually tuning the Total G. He'd like me to do actually a flight performance of the Total G. I don't have time to do flight performance this morning, but I will just go over some of the tips on flight tuning. The main thing we run into flight tuning, if you go to the interface, is actually the stops. How do you get the stops to work correctly? And there are two locations where you work on the stops. One is actually in the advanced menu on the main page under stops. There's left, right stops and forward, back stops. And what these stops are for are if you do multiple flips. If you sit there and do like 3 flips and then go to stop, if it continues after you let go and then stops, that means that number is too high. You need to turn that number down. If you do multiple flips, like 3 flips in a row and then stop and it kind of bounces back, like it catches and bounces back, that means that number is too low and you need to turn that stop number up. Now, if you're doing quick jabs, like quick tick-tocks, and then in those they tend to coast or they tend to bounce back, that's a different setting. That is not the stop setting. That is actually in the background menus. Go to background settings, excuse me. That's actually under the control response. That's the actual quick control response of aileron and elevator. So let's say you're doing quick tick-tocks, and when you go to stop, it actually kind of coasts on you again. Just in a quick tick-tock, it kind of doesn't stop crisply, it kind of coasts on just sharp stops. That means that that response number is too high. If you go and it actually when you stop, it kind of bounces back, you hit and it kind of bounces back, that means that response number is too low. That's the same thing on aileron response. If you go and stop, go to do a quick tick-tock and you go to stop and it kind of coasts or it feels like it kind of catches and doesn't want to go back quickly, that means that that response number is too high. If it kind of bounces back, that means that response number is a little too low. And I usually want them actually to bounce back just a tiny bit. That way, if I'm doing tick-tocks, it actually feels faster. It'll hit and bounce back just a tiny bit, and then actually like you're going the other way. So I actually tend to like those numbers just a tiny bit on the low side. And if you notice, and it's generally true, the aileron response is a higher number than the elevator response. That's just a general thing I have found. Usually it's about 9 or 10 units higher on aileron than elevator. Okay. On anything else on flight tuning? The other thing, people talk about wanting to have a more flybar-like feel. Generally what that means is that your control response around the middle is faster, so when you move around the middle it goes faster. Right at the bottom, like low tick-tocks and stuff, here you want to go fast, or aileron you want to go really fast back and forth. That really is just your roll speed and your flip speed. They control your initial rate around the center. So as you turn this number up, it's going to tick-tock faster. As you turn this number up, it's going to tick-tock faster. So you can use this to control your tick-tock speed and rate around the middle without affecting your endpoints. So it'll still feel linear as you're doing tick-tocks, but you get that faster, more flybar-like feel. Okay, the next question we have is actually related to the G-View. I'll get the G-View out, the G-View 2 out, and actually show you a little bit about going through the menus using the G-View 2.